Scoot this way a little bit.
A little more.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all for letting us talk to y'all. Now tell us who you are and what your connection is to the B-58.
My name is Pat Hayter, and my husband was DSO in the B-58, and it was a beautiful airplane, and the best part of it was watching it take off at night.
Carol McDonald, my husband, was an aircraft commander, and my children especially, I have 2 sons, enjoyed going out with their mother to the end of the runway when Dad took off at night to see the planes, and it was rather spectacular, and we were all very sad when they decided to get rid of it.
My name is Donna Williford, and I'm married to Mitch Williford. He was an aircraft commander at Grissom, Bunker Hill, Grissom. And when I met him, he was still flying the B-47, and then he transitioned directly into the B-58, and we were married eventually. And when we were married, I met Pat Hayter because her husband was a DSO on the crew. So I've known Pat for over 53 or 54 years.
Even though we're 39.
Y'all pull that off well.
Oh yeah.
Well, tell us what kind of memories you have of the B-58. I'm sure that both the sights and sounds of it left quite an impression. Tell us what you thought.
Well, the sad part of the B-58 is when we first started out in the wing, there were a lot of little quirks that had to be worked out. And we did lose a lot of very close friends. You know, when you're stationed together at a base, you become a family.
Absolutely.
And that is your family. And when somebody gets killed, it hurts everybody. And we went through several of those right off the bat. But I will say, I was never worried, not once, about my husband, because I knew he knew what he was doing.
No, I probably would say the same thing. My husband had been in the service quite a few years when he went into the B-58 program, and he didn't come into it until later on in 1966. And they still lost a few people, but I never worried about him, no matter what he was flying or where he was flying, because he's just kind of a steady guy and with a good head on his shoulder and a lot smarter than he thinks he is.
Well, I remember my husband telling me not to worry about his flying because he knew what he was doing, I guess, but I should worry about the time he spent driving between the base and our home in Kokomo. He said that is a far more dangerous road than what I'm doing up in the sky. So
So what do you think the bringing a B-58 to Fort Worth would mean to this community?
I don't know what it would mean to this community, but I know what it would mean to this organization. That is our plane. That is our baby. Those men worked hours and trained hours. And it's like a child. And losing that child would be heartbreaking to these men right now and to all of us.
sounds good.
Yes. Very good.
Very good.
Thank you.
That should work.
Your kids have memories of this airplane. What do you think their memories are of this airplane?
Well, I guess most of the time they would say, "Where's Daddy?" And I'd say, "Well, he's flying or he's on alert." And they'd say, "Oh, will he be home soon?" I said, "Maybe, maybe not." And I know one night he'd been gone for a while, and he came in very, very late at night, and I had put the kids to bed early because I didn't want him to know he was coming home, and I knew I couldn't get him to sleep. Anyway, he came in late, and later on at night, my little boy got up, and he came in the room, and he leaned over the bed, and he tapped his dad on his head, and he said, "Is that you, Daddy?" And he said, "And who are you expecting?"
Oh, goodness. I remember one Christmas when my husband had to be on alert, and my son, they tried to make it so that you could have a meal together, but my son got the mumps. And so we had this crew cab, small, like a motorhome, and we drove it over there, and we had Christmas dinner inside with the two boys, because we knew if one had the mumps the next week the other would have the mumps, so we had to be without Daddy for Christmas that year. But then when he got home, we got to open the presents and everything. But that's one Christmas I'm not sure that they remember, because they were very young, but they're both almost middle-aged men now, and they really love the fact that, in fact, our son purchased his dad a model for Father's Day last year, and to go with the ones that he had. So they're quite proud of their father.
You know, children, I have to say one more thing. Children adjust to what their families are doing. And I know a lot of people thought, Air Force life, that's got to be crazy. Well, it's no crazier than any other life. Your children know what their father's doing, and if you're a good wife, you will not complain at all about it. And that was one thing I did try to do. I never complained when he wasn't home, and believe me, they weren't home very much. But it was a wonderful life, and again, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Amen.
Oh, I loved being an Air Force wife. I really did.
I did too.
Yeah.
I remember talking about children when I went into labor one night for our daughter. Mitch said, "You know," he said, "I have to go fly in the morning." And so I said, "Well, I have to go to the hospital right now." So we went to the hospital, and he didn't spend much time holding my hand. I didn't expect him to, because he had to sleep, because he had to fly that morning. And so he stuck around for her delivery, and then he said, "I've got to go fly," and he left. And there I was.
With a new baby.
With a new baby. That's all right. I handled it, and so did he.
Yeah. You learn to handle a lot.
That's right.
Because most of the time, none of us live close to parents, grandparents, anyone that can come and help. I had 2 children. Patty had more. She had 2 children, and we just did it ourselves. I mean, it was just us, and we had a baby, and we knew how to take care of it. And 2 weeks later, our husband went reflex someplace to a foreign country, but it's okay. I never really minded that much.
Wouldn't trade it for anything.
In fact, that's probably the few times that we actually got anything done, because they were home so infrequent that when they were home, you wanted to spend as much time with them as you could. So we didn't get a lot done around the house.
So what was life like when they were on alert and were gone for a week?
Hectic.
Because you knew where they were.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It seemed like that was always the time that we had an accident. Like, one got his head cut once, and one broke his arm once. It seemed like whenever it happened, Daddy was not home.
That's right.
But that's something you learn to adjust to.
Yeah.
That's right.
And Bob was gone one time a whole year, and that first 2 or 3 months I thought, I will never make it. Well, then he came home, and he was home about a week, and I thought, what's going on here? He acted like I couldn't do anything. I mean, I'd been doing everything for a year on my own, and all of a sudden this man walks in and wants to take over again. I was glad to see him, but I thought, I can take care of this.
I can do it.
Absolutely.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Any other memories connected to the B-58?
A lot connected to the reunions, really.
Oh, wonderful.
We really got to be good friends, because I knew Donna really well, but I didn't know Pat well when I started coming.
Did y'all's husbands know each other? I know.
yes.
I know Mitch and Bob
Yeah.
knew each other.
They knew George too. Yes. Yeah. No, but the guys, they have a special camaraderie, because and I said, living on a base as we did, it was like everybody kind of knew what everybody else made, so nobody was any better than anybody else, and we all just, it was like a big family, and dysfunctional sometimes, but it was really quite wonderful, and we had more fun because we are kind of cut up sometimes.
We're a lot alike.
That's what I understand.
I would like to mention one thing. I think one of the things that really stood out in my memory was the Cuban crisis. My husband was on alert, and I wasn't real sure what was going on. I knew what was going on, sorta. And Bob never said much about what was going on because he wasn't supposed to. But here I was with 3 little kids, listening to the news and imagining what could happen. And they kept saying, "Don't worry, we'll take you all to shelters somewhere." And I'm thinking, if this really happens, a shelter's not going to protect us. But again, I put on my big girl pants and went on, and we made it through this crisis just fine.
We talked a little bit about that with Bob and
Yeah.
Mitch, and what was life like? What did you tell your kids was going on? Did they know what was going on?
As far as my kids were concerned, their daddy was at work, and he was flying an airplane, and he was protecting us. And that's all they knew. I mean, it was normal to them. It's just like any other man gets up and goes to work every day.
That's right.
Mine was.
And I didn't go into horrible details with them because they were too young to discuss that with them. And I certainly didn't want them to think I was afraid, even though I was absolutely scared to death.
I had a 2-year-old. He wasn't old enough to know. And I know one of my neighbors said, "You always have more food in your house than any person I've ever seen." So she says, "I know where we can go if we really need something to eat." So I always had a big pantry. I still do, well stocked. And I don't know, maybe that's coming from a background of when I was a child and, right after the Great Depression, if you had food, you were lucky. So I've always been.
Mitch and I did not have any children at that time. So,
Well, it sounds like it was quite a tense time. The guys mentioned that they certainly knew what was happening, and that was curious what y'all knew.
It was really kind of funny in a way. My husband called me. He was in B-47s then, and he was in Plattsburgh, New York, and he called me and he said, "I can't tell you where I am, but I can tell you where my crew is." And they had told these guys, "Now you could let your wife know where your crew is." And I thought, well, aren't they together? I mean, So I had a pretty good idea where he was, and turns out they were across the lake in Burlington, Vermont. So they hadn't gone really very far, but they were already armed and ready in case they had to go. But I'm just not the type, I guess. I have a lot of faith. I'm just not the type that worries a lot about that. So it was great.
Well, Bob always said, "Don't ever listen to the news and believe what they say."
Yeah, that's right.
And then you won't worry. And that's what you had to do. You just had to be tough. And I guess we were.
And we still are.
And we still are. We're tough old broads right now.
Well, thank y'all for coming and talking with
Well,
us.
thank you for letting us.
Yes, thank you for letting us come. We enjoyed
you.
this. Yes. Thank you
And-
for inviting us.
And we enjoyed talking to Mitch and Bob so much, we're going to talk to them again. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, the two of them together.
Well, don't believe anything they say about us.
Well, now we have questions.
My husband is so quiet though, so so he probably didn't stand a chance with those two guys. It's a good thing he didn't have all three of them together. Thank you.